looked me in the eyes, my own brother, and with a coldness I had never seen before, he told me to get out. Not please, not could you, but get out. And for a second, my brain just short-circuited. I was standing in the hallway of the house I grew up in, the house that I owned, and my own brother was telling me to leave. I had a million questions, but the only words that came out were a choked-up whisper. "What are you talking about, Leo?" He just scoffed, a bitter, resentful sound, and pointed a finger at the door. "You heard me. This is my house now. Get out." If you're watching this, you probably think you know how this story goes. A misunderstanding, a fight, a sibling rivalry gone too far. But I promise you, this isn't that. This is a story about betrayal so deep it carves out a hollow space in your chest. It's a story about a family home, a promise, and a single piece of paper that changed everything. My name is Avor, and this is the story of how my brother kicked me out of the house that was in my name. To understand why this happened, we have to go back to the beginning. Not just to the day it happened, but to a time when our family was a unit. When the four of us, my mom, my dad, my brother Leo, and me, were just us. Our house was a sprawling, two-story Victorian on a quiet, tree-lined street. It wasn't a mansion by any stretch, but to us, it was perfect. My dad, a civil engineer, bought it as a fixer-upper when my mom was pregnant with me. He spent every weekend, every evening after work, stripping old wallpaper, sanding floors, and building the life he wanted for us. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint is one of my earliest and most comforting memories. My brother, Leo, is 2 years older than me. Growing up, we were inseparable. He was my protector, my partner in crime. We built forts out of blankets in the living room, we dug for buried treasure in the backyard, and we spent countless hours listening to our dad tell us stories about the history of the house, how it had survived a lightning strike and a small fire back in the 1920s. He always said the house had a soul, a resilience that matched our families. We would laugh and nod, not fully understanding, but believing him completely. Our childhood was idyllic in many ways. We weren't rich, but we had enough. We had parents who loved us and a home that felt like a safe, warm embrace. Our parents always stressed the importance of family, of looking out for each other. "You tell all you have in the end," my mom would say. "You must always have each other's backs." I took those words to heart. My brother, I thought, did too. The first crack in our perfect world appeared when I was 18 and Leo was 20. Our mom, the anchor of our family, was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease. It was progressive and debilitating. It started subtly, a little joint pain, some fatigue, but within a year, she needed a walker. By the time I was in my final year of college, she was mostly confined to a wheelchair. My dad, bless his heart, tried to do it all. He worked his demanding job, he cooked, he cleaned, and he became my mom's full-time caregiver. But he couldn't do it alone. Leo had just graduated from college and had a great job offer in another state. He was ambitious, driven. He wanted to get out of our small town to make a name for himself. And I was still in college, but my world was centered around my family. I had a part-time job, but my priority was helping my mom and dad. When Mom's condition worsened, Dad sat us down. He told us he was thinking of retiring early to focus on her care. That was when Leo said he was taking the job. He said he had to start his life, that he couldn't put his dreams on hold. I remember feeling a pang of disappointment, a deep sadness that he wouldn't be with us, But I understood. I really did. I told him to follow his dreams. My parents encouraged him to. It was a tough choice, but we all agreed it was the right one for him, and so Leo left. He moved 3 states away and started his new, exciting life. He called every now and then, but the calls got shorter, less frequent. Meanwhile, I became my father's right hand. I learned to give my mom her medication, to help her in and out of her chair, to prepare her meals. I juggled my classes, my part-time job, and my new role as a caregiver. It was exhausting, emotionally and physically, but it never felt like a burden. It felt like a privilege. It felt like the most important thing I had ever done. My parents saw my dedication. They saw how I put my life on hold for them, how I cared for my mom with a love and patience that was simply part of me. One day, a few months before I graduated, my dad called me into the living room. My mom was sitting in her favorite armchair, her hands clasped on her lap, a soft smile on her face. My dad cleared his throat and told me that my mom and he had been talking. He said they wanted to do something for me, to repay me for everything I had done. "We want you to have the house, sweetheart," my dad said. "We're putting it in your name. It's the least we can do." I was stunned. I looked at my mom, who nodded, her eyes glistening. "We want you to have a place to call your own, Avor," she said, her voice a little weak. "You deserve it more than anyone." I tried to protest, to say no, that I was just doing what was right, but they were insistent. They said they had already spoken to their lawyer. Within a month, the deed was transferred. The house, the home that held all of my memories, the one my dad had poured his heart and soul into, was officially mine. I didn't feel a sense of ownership, not really. It still felt like our house, the family home. I was just the steward, the one who was supposed to take care of it, to keep it safe. I didn't tell Leo right away. It wasn't a secret, but it wasn't something I felt the need to brag about. I figured I would tell him the next time he came to visit, which, at that point, was a rare occurrence. We were still close, but the distance and the different paths we were on had created a small chasm between us. He was living his life, and I was living mine. Life continued in this new rhythm for several more years. My mom's condition stabilized somewhat, and I found a full-time job at a local graphic design firm. I was living at home, which was now technically my home, and helping my parents. It was a comfortable, peaceful existence. My dad retired, and he and I worked as a team, caring for my mom and keeping the house in good shape. It was during this time that I met Mark. He was a kind, gentle man I met at work. We started dating, and he quickly became a part of my life, a source of light and happiness during what could be very dark and difficult days. He understood the demands on my time and my heart, and he never once made me feel guilty for putting my family first. The real shift in my brother's attitude came a few years after he had moved away. He got a promotion, and with it, a huge ego boost. His calls started to change. He would talk about his success, his big deals, his fancy car. He would ask what I was up to, and when I told him about my job, about caring for MOM, about Mark, he would listen with a sort of detached politeness. It wasn't a rivalry, not yet. It was more like a disconnect. He was on one path, and I was on another, and he seemed to have decided that his was the more important one. The first time he brought up the house was over a phone call about a year before the big event. He was coming to town for a work conference. and he wanted to stay with us. I can't wait to see the old place, he said. Do you think Mom and Dad would mind if I checked out the basement? I want to see if my old baseball cards are still there. I laughed. Of course not, Leo. You know you're always welcome. Then he said something that made my stomach churn just a little bit. So, is Dad still paying the mortgage? Or do you guys split it? I hesitated. The mortgage had been paid off years ago, long before the deed was transferred. But the way he said it, the possessive tone in his voice, made me feel uneasy. It's all taken care of, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Mom and Dad have handled everything. He didn't press the issue, but I felt a sense of dread. It was the first time I realized he might see the house not as a home, but as an asset. When he arrived for his visit, he was different. He was slicker, more polished. He wore expensive clothes and talked on a new, high-tech phone. He was a different person than the scruffy, sweet boy I remembered. He was cordial with Mom and Dad, but he was always in a hurry. He spent most of his time on his phone, answering emails, taking calls. He looked around the house not with nostalgia, but with a critical eye. He pointed out the old appliances, the peeling paint on the windowsill, the fact that we were still using the same clunky old TV. You know, this place is a bit of a relic, he said one evening, shaking his head. It's a good investment, though. Real estate values have gone up a lot around here. I felt a coldness settle over me. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he said them, the calculating tone in his voice. He didn't see the memories in the scuffed hardwood floors or the history in the faded wallpaper. He saw numbers. He saw dollar signs. I tried to shake it off to tell myself he was just being practical, but the feeling lingered. He was only in town for 3 days, and each day, he seemed to find a new flaw in the house, a new reason it needed to be fixed or updated. The last night he was here, he was having a beer with Dad on the back porch. I went outside to join them. My dad was telling a story about a summer he and Mom had spent remodeling the kitchen. Leo listened, but his eyes were on his phone. When Dad finished, there was a quiet moment. Then Lou said, "Dad, I was thinking, you guys should consider selling the house." My dad went silent. I felt my blood run cold. "Why would we do that, son?" My dad asked, his voice low and serious. "This is our home." Leo just shrugged. "I know, but the market is hot right now. You could get a great price for this place. You could buy a smaller place, a condo, maybe one with an elevator for Mom. You could use the rest to pay for her care, travel, live a little." My dad looked at him, his face a mask of disbelief. "Son, we don't want to sell this house. This is where we raised you too. This is where we're going to stay." Leo's face hardened. "It's not practical, Dad. You're getting older. The maintenance on this place is going to get to be too much. You should think about the future." I couldn't stand it anymore. "Leo, that's not for you to decide," I said, my voice shaking. "They want to stay here. This is their home." He turned to me, his face a mixture of impatience and condescension. "Avor, you don't get it. You've been stuck here your whole life. You don't see the bigger picture. This house is a gold mine. You're holding onto it for emotional reasons, but it's just a waste of money." My dad stood up then. "Leo, that's enough," he said, his voice firm. "This house is not for sale. It's not a topic for discussion. It's settled." Leo just nodded, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. He left the next day, without another word about the house. But the seed had been planted. The poison had been dropped. And from that day forward, The house, our family home, became something else entirely. It became a point of contention, a ticking time bomb. A few months after Leo's visit, my mom's health took a turn for the worse. She had a bad fall and needed round-the-clock care. My dad was devastated, and I knew I had to step up even more. I quit my job and became her full-time caregiver. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think twice. My priority was my family. My dad was a rock, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. My brother, I'll give him this, called more often. He would ask how MOM was doing, but the conversations were always short, and he never offered to help. He never offered to come home, not even for a week. He would say, "I'm so sorry, Avor. I wish I could be there," and then immediately change the subject. My MOM passed away peacefully in her sleep 6 months later. It was a cold, quiet morning in November. I was the one who found her. She looked serene, like she was finally at rest. The grief was a physical weight, crushing me. I felt like a piece of me was gone forever. My dad was lost. He and my MOM had been together since they were teenagers. He didn't know how to exist without her. We spent the next few weeks in a fog of grief, planning the funeral, greeting friends and family. Leo flew in for the service. He seemed sad, but it was a different kind of sad. It was a formal, contained sadness, not the raw, visceral pain my dad and I were feeling. After the funeral, when we were all sitting in the living room, surrounded by platters of food people had brought over, Leo finally said what was on his mind. He looked at my dad, his voice low and serious. "Dad, we need to talk about the house." My dad looked up, his eyes tired and weary. "Not now, son. Please." But Leo wouldn't be deterred. "Now is the perfect time, Dad. You're alone now. You need a change of pace. You should sell this place. You don't need all this space." My dad's face went from grief to anger in an instant. "This is not for sale, Leo. I am not leaving the home your mother and I built. Not now, not ever." Leo didn't back down. "I understand you're emotional, but you have to be practical, Dad. What's the point of holding onto a house that's just a burden? I can help you sell it. We'll find you a nice condo, a retirement community. You can live out your days in comfort." I had had enough. "Leo, stop it. This is not the time to be discussing this. Our MOM just died." I stood up, my voice shaking with anger. "Why is this all you can think about?" He looked at me, a flash of pure contempt in his eyes. "Because it's a 100-year-old house that's just sitting here, depreciating, and it could be worth a fortune. You're both being sentimental and irrational. It's not a home, it's an asset." My dad put his hand on my arm. "It's okay, Avor. Leo, you've said your piece. We're not selling." End of discussion. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Leo just shook his head, a look of frustration on his face. He didn't mention it again that night. He left the next morning, without saying goodbye. I knew in my heart that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a war. For the next few months, my dad and I just existed in a state of quiet grief. We kept busy, cleaning out my mom's things, trying to find a new routine. Leo called once a week, but the conversations were stilted and cold. He never mentioned the house, but I could feel it, hanging in the air between us like a storm cloud. Then, one day, the storm broke. My dad had a mild heart attack. He was in the hospital for a week and I was terrified. When I called Leo to tell him, he was at first silent, and then he asked a single question. Did you tell them about the house? I was so shocked I couldn't even answer. The doctor said it was a result of stress and grief. He told my dad he needed to take it easy. That was the last straw for me. I called Leo back and I told him, "This is your fault. The stress you're putting on him, it's hurting him, Leo. You need to stop." He just laughed, a short, bitter sound. "It's my fault. You're the one who's been holding on to that house. You're the one who's being selfish." That's when I hung up on him. I didn't hear from him for a month. My dad's health improved, but he was frail. He told me he was tired. He wanted to live out his days in the home he built, but he was afraid of what Leo would do. I tried to reassure him. "Dad, I own the house. It's in my name. Leo can't do anything." My dad looked at me, a sad, knowing look in his eyes. Family can do anything, Avor. Don't ever forget that. A few months later, I got a call from a lawyer's office. They said they were representing my brother, Leo, and they had a formal request to discuss the ownership of our family home. I laughed. I literally laughed out loud. This was so absurd, so outrageous, that I couldn't believe it was real. I told the lawyer that the house was in my name and I had no intention of selling it. The lawyer was polite but firm. "I understand," he said, "but your brother is contesting the deed. He says there was a verbal agreement between you and your parents that the house would be a shared inheritance." I hung up. My hands were shaking. A shared inheritance? That was a complete lie. There had never been any such agreement. I didn't tell my dad about the lawyer's call. I didn't want to stress him out. I told my boyfriend, Mark, and he was livid. "This is insane, Avor. You need to get a lawyer." Now, I agreed. I called the same law firm my parents had used to transfer the deed to me. They were wonderful. They had all the paperwork, the signatures, the proof that the deed was legally and unequivocally in my name. The lawyer told me not to worry, that Leo didn't have a leg to stand on. "This is just a bully move," she said. "He's trying to scare you." I felt a surge of confidence. She was right. He was trying to bully me, to intimidate me. But I wasn't going to let him. I had the law on my side, and more importantly, I had the truth. My dad was still alive, and he would confirm everything. My mom was gone, but her love and her intention was still here, in the walls of this house. I felt safe. I felt secure. I felt like I was holding an impenetrable shield, and then, one day, it all came crashing down. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My dad was taking a nap, and I was in the living room, working on my laptop. The doorbell rang. It was an unusual time for a visitor. I opened the door and there he was. Leo. He was with a woman I didn't know, a stern-looking woman in a business suit, and behind them, a man in a police uniform. My heart started to pound. "Leo, what is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just looked past me into the living room, a look of triumph on his face. The woman stepped forward. "Miss, I have a court order for your eviction." The world tilted. The words didn't make sense. "Eviction? You're mistaken. I own this house. I have the deed. This is my home." Leo just smiled. A slow, cruel smile. The woman held up a stack of papers. "This is a court order, ma'am. We have a judge's signature. Your brother, Leo, has been granted temporary ownership of the property until the legal dispute is resolved. You must vacate the premises immediately." I stood there, frozen. unable to process what was happening. This was a nightmare, a horrifying, nonsensical dream. I looked at Leo, a million questions burning in my mind. He looked me in the eyes, my own brother, and he said, "I told you, Avor. This is my house now. Get out." My shield had been shattered. I was standing in my own home, defenseless, with a cold-blooded stranger at the door, and my own flesh and blood telling me to leave. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. This was a nightmare, a horrifying, nonsensical dream. I looked at Leo, a million questions burning in my mind. He looked me in the eyes, my own brother, and he said, "I told you, Avor. This is my house now. Get out." My shield had been shattered. I was standing in my own home, defenseless, with a cold-blooded stranger at the door, and my own flesh and blood telling me to leave. My dad, awakened by the commotion, stumbled out of his room, his eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" he rasped, his voice weak. He saw Leo, then the police officer, then the stern woman, and his face crumpled. "Leo, what have you done?" Leo turned to him, his voice suddenly calm, almost gentle. "Dad, it's okay. Avor just needs to leave for a bit. We're going to get this house sorted out. It's for your own good, too. This place isn't safe for you anymore." My dad looked from Leo to me, then back to Leo, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. He tried to take a step forward, but his legs seemed to give out, and he leaned heavily against the doorframe. "No, Leo, you can't. This is Avor's house. I gave it to her. We gave it to her." The woman, who introduced herself as Detective Miller, though she wasn't actually a detective but a bailiff, I later learned, stepped forward. "Sir, please remain calm. This is a legal proceeding. Miss Avor, you need to comply with the court order. Any resistance will result in further legal action." She held out the papers. My hands trembled as I took them. The words swam before my eyes: temporary restraining order, eviction notice, disputed property. It listed Leo as the petitioner, claiming I was unfit to manage the property, that I was financially irresponsible, and that the deed transfer was done under undue influence when my parents were vulnerable. Lies. All of it. Vile, disgusting. Lies. "This isn't real," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "This is a lie. My parents gave me this house freely. I have the deed." I tried to explain, to plead, but the bailiff was unmoved. "Ma'am, the court has ruled that these claims warrant a temporary transfer of possession to Mr. Leo until the full case can be heard. You have 1 hour to collect essential belongings, 1 hour. 1 hour to gather a lifetime." My head spun. My dad was still leaning against the doorframe, looking utterly defeated. This was killing him. I looked at Leo, hoping to see some flicker of the brother I once knew, some regret, some shame. There was nothing. Just a cold, hard triumph in his eyes. "Why, Leo?" I choked out. "Why are you doing this?" He finally looked at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Because, Avor, you've always been so sentimental, so stuck in the past. This house is a valuable asset, and you're not equipped to handle it. Dad needs proper care, and this house is the key. I'm doing what's best for everyone, even if you can't see it. This is not about what's best." I cried, my voice rising. "This is about greed. You're trying to steal our home." The bailiff cleared her throat. "Ma'am, your time is ticking. Please cooperate." With a heavy heart, I walked past them, into the house that was no longer mine, at least not in this moment. Every step felt like a betrayal. Every room was suddenly filled with ghost moans, laughter in the kitchen, Dad's stories by the fireplace, Leo and my childhood shenanigans in the backyard. How could he do this? How could he rip away not just my home, but our collective history, our memories? My dad shuffled into the living room and sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I wanted to comfort him, but I was crumbling inside myself. "Dad," I whispered, "I'm so sorry." He just shook his head. Unable to speak, I raced to my bedroom, tears streaming down my face. What do you pack when your entire life is being uprooted? In an hour, I grabbed my purse, my phone, my laptop, a few changes of clothes, important documents I could find quickly, my birth certificate, my college degree, but most importantly, the deed to the house, which I kept in a fireproof box. I shoved them all into a duffel bag. My photo albums, my grandmother's necklace, my favorite old worn-out blanket, these were the things that held my heart, but I didn't have time. I had to leave them behind. It felt like tearing off a limb.as. I came back into the living room. My dad looked up, his eyes pleading. "Avor, where will you go?" "I don't know, Dad," I choked out. "I'll call Mark. He'll help me." Leo was already directing the bailiff, pointing out things, acting as if he owned the place. "Make sure she doesn't take anything that's not hers," he instructed. His words cut like knives. Everything in that house was hers in a way he would never understand, even if the paper didn't reflect it at that moment. The bailiff followed me to the door. "Is this all you're taking?" she asked, her voice surprisingly soft. I just nodded, unable to speak. I took one last look around, trying to memorize every detail. The worn rug by the fireplace, the slightly chipped paint on the banister, the framed family photos on the mantelpiece, my mom's radiant smile, my dad's proud gaze, a younger, happier Leo with his arm around me. It all felt like a lifetime ago. As I stepped onto the porch, the bailiff closed the door behind me. I heard the click of the lock, and then the sickening sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. The finality of it. I was locked out from my own home. I stood on the sidewalk, the duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the papers clutched in my hand, feeling utterly lost. The sun was shining, birds were singing, but the world felt muted, gray. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, and called Mark. "Avor, what's wrong?" "You sound awful." "Mark," I choked out, "he did it." "Leo." "He kicked me out. They just evicted me from the house." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What?" "That's impossible. I'm coming to get you." "Where are you?" I'm still at the house," I whispered. "I don't know where to go." "Stay right there. I'm on my way." "Don't move." Mark arrived in less than 15 minutes, his face etched with worry. He pulled up to the curb, jumped out of the car, and immediately wrapped me in a tight hug. I clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, the accumulated shock and grief finally breaking through. "I don't understand, Mark. How could this happen? The house is in my name." He held me at arm's length, looking into my eyes. "We're going to figure this out, Avor. I promise you. First, let's get you somewhere safe." He took my duffel bag and helped me into his car. As we drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. Leo was standing on the porch, talking to the bailiff, a smug look on his face. He saw me looking, and he raised his hand in a mocking wave. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money for him. This was about power, about winning, about proving a point. We drove directly to Mark's apartment. His small, cozy space suddenly felt like a sanctuary. He made me tea, sat me down, and patiently listened as I recounted the horrifying events. I showed him the eviction papers, my hand still shaking. He read them carefully, his brow furrowed. "Avor, this is completely bogus," he said, handing them back. "Your lawyer said he had no grounds. How did he get a judge to sign off on this?" That was the question. The one that gnawed at me. My lawyer, Sarah, had been so confident. I called her office, but it was after hours. I left a frantic message, explaining what had happened, begging her to call me back first thing in the morning. The next few days were a blur of shock and disbelief. I stayed at Mark's, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. My dad called me, his voice barely a whisper. "Avor, I'm so sorry." I tried to stop him. "He won't let me talk to you." I could hear the desperation in his voice. "He says I'm confused. He won't let me leave the house." My heart broke for him. He was trapped in his own home, a prisoner of his own son. Finally, Sarah called me back. Her voice was grave. "Avor, I am so sorry. I can't believe he managed to pull this off." She explained that Leo had filed an emergency petition, claiming my father was incapacitated, and that I was financially exploiting him, using the house as leverage. He had presented doctored documents, falsified medical reports, manipulated bank statements that showed large sums of money moving from my father's account to mine, which were actually routine transfers for medical bills and household expenses that I managed for Dad, carefully documented. He had also found an obscure clause in an old, historical trust document related to the original purchase of the house that implied it was intended for family lineage, and he twisted it to suggest I was trying to monopolize the family asset. It was a cunning, malicious attack designed to exploit my father's recent health issues and the grief following my mother's death, portraying me as a manipulative opportunist. And because it was an emergency petition, and perhaps because the judge was overloaded or swayed by Leo's convincing and fraudulent presentation, a temporary order was granted without a full hearing where I could present my side. "He lied, Sarah," I choked out. "He fabricated everything. My dad is not incapacitated. Those bank statements are twisted out of context, and the trust document is ancient and irrelevant." "I know, Avor," she said, her voice full of empathy. "This is a dirty play. It's called abusive litigation. He's banking on you not having the resources or the stomach to fight him, hoping you'll just give up." He got a temporary order based on an ex parte hearing, meaning I wasn't even there to present your side. "We have to file for an immediate hearing to vacate this order. We'll present the actual deed, your father's testimony, and challenge every one of his fraudulent claims. It's going to be a tough fight, but we can win this." Her words gave me a sliver of hope, but the mountain in front of me seemed insurmountable. I was homeless, my father was a hostage, and my brother was a monster. How do you fight someone who is willing to lie, cheat, and destroy their own family for money? The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, affidavits, and an agonizing sense of displacement. Mark was my rock. He let me stay with him indefinitely, he listened to me vent, and he held me when I cried. He encouraged me, reminding me of my strength, even when I felt utterly powerless. He helped me gather all the financial records, the actual medical reports, every single document that proved Leo's claims were baseless. Meanwhile, Leo was busy. He changed the locks on the house, of course. But then, I heard from a neighbor that he was already having contractors come through. He was planning renovations, tearing out walls, ripping up floors. He was systematically erasing every trace of the home I knew, as if by destroying the physical structure, he could destroy the memories too. It felt like he was desecrating a sacred space, a shrine to my parents' love. He was making it impossible for me to ever come back, to ever feel at home there again, even if I won. Every day, the fight seemed to grow harder, the stakes higher. Leo's lawyer was aggressive, sending cease and desist letters, threatening me with defamation lawsuits for telling anyone about his lies. He was trying to silence me, to isolate me. But I refused to back down. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about my family's legacy. It was about justice. And it was about proving that some bonds, even when broken, could still fight back. I missed my dad terribly. Leo had cut off all communication. He wouldn't answer my calls, and he had taken away my dad's phone. I tried to visit, but he refused to open the door, threatening to call the police for trespassing. It was agonizing, knowing my frail father was inside that house, alone with my brother, who had become a stranger. I even tried to send him letters, but I suspected Leo was intercepting them. I was losing my dad, too, and that pain was almost unbearable. The first hearing was set for a month later. It felt like an eternity. During that month, I lived in a constant state of anxiety, anger, and a desperate longing for the life I had lost. I replayed every conversation with Leo, searching for clues, for the moment he turned into this person. Was he always like this, hidden beneath a veneer of charm and ambition? Or did money truly corrupt him so completely? I remembered my dad's words. Family can do anything. Avor. Don't ever forget that. At the time, he meant it as a warning about the lengths family will go to protect each other. Now, it felt like a prophecy of the depths of betrayal. The morning of the hearing arrived heavy and grey. I dressed carefully, trying to project an image of strength I didn't feel. Mark was with me, holding my hand, his quiet support a lifeline. Sarah, my lawyer, was confident but cautious. He's a master manipulator, Avor, she warned. Don't let him get to you. We walked into the courthouse, and there he was, Leo. He was impeccably dressed, looking calm and composed, as if he hadn't just torn my life apart. He saw me and offered a small, patronizing smile. He was with his lawyer, a sharp, unsmiling man who looked like he could chew nails and spit out legal jargon. My stomach churned. This was it. The moment of truth. The judge entered, and we all rose. The air was thick with tension. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a battle for my past, my present, and my future. It was a fight for the very soul of my family. And I was ready to fight with everything I had. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, a heavy, suffocating blanket of silence broken only by the scratch of a pen and the muffled rustle of papers. I sat beside Sarah, my hands clasped so tightly they were white. Across the room, Leo sat with his own lawyer, a look of calm confidence on his face. He seemed to have no shame, no fear. He was a perfect portrait of a man who believed he was in the right. Mark sat in the back, a silent, comforting presence. The bailiff called our case, and the judge, a formidable woman with a stern expression, looked down at us from her bench. Mr. Leo, your lawyer has filed a compelling emergency petition. The court has granted a temporary restraining order based on evidence of potential financial mismanagement and undue influence. We are here today to hear arguments for and against vacating that order. Mr. Leo, you may present your case. Leo's lawyer stood up, a smooth-talking man who looked like he had stepped off a magazine cover. He painted a picture of a loving, concerned son who had been forced to take drastic action to protect his elderly, vulnerable father from a manipulative sister. He claimed that I had been subtly isolating my parents for years, using my caregiving role to gain control of their assets. He presented the forged bank statements, pointing out the large sums that he claimed were my payments for care, despite them being a twisted fabrication of routine household transactions. Then, Leo himself took the stand. He was a master actor. He spoke with a trembling voice, recounting a fictional history of my selfishness and greed. I always knew Avor was different, he said, looking at the judge with tear-filled eyes. She always wanted more. When Mom got sick, she saw an opportunity. She convinced my parents to transfer the house to her, claiming it was for her help. But it was just a way to cut me out, he went on, talking about my supposed indifference to our mother's suffering and my obsession with money. The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, that they sounded almost plausible. He claimed my dad had been confused and frail when he signed the deed, and that I had coerced him. It was a complete and utter fabrication, a vile assault on my character and on the memory of my mother. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. Every word he said was a fresh wound, a new layer of betrayal. The judge was listening intently, her face impassive. I could see her looking at the documents Leo's lawyer had presented. He had done his homework, crafting a story so deceitful and well documented that it was a believable tapestry of lies. Then it was my turn. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Sarah guided me gently. Miss Avor, please tell the court about your relationship with your parents and the circumstances of the deed transfer. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I spoke of my childhood, of the love and bond we all shared. I talked about how I willingly put my life on hold to care for my parents, not for money or property, but out of love. I explained that the deed was a gift, a gesture of gratitude from my parents for my dedication. I looked at the judge and said, I didn't ask for the house, Your Honor. They gave it to me. My mother wanted me to have a place to call my own, to know that my home was secure. I showed the actual deed, a single sheet of paper with my name on it, signed and notarized, with no mention of a trust or any shared ownership. The judge looked from me to the deed and back again. She listened to Sarah's argument, which systematically dismantled Leo's fabricated claims, showing that the bank statements were manipulated and that the medical reports were taken out of context. But Leo's lawyer was quick to counter, claiming that the deed itself was proof of my undue influence, that it was simply too perfect, too convenient. The legal jargon flew over my head, but the meaning was clear. They were trying to twist the truth into a lie and make the lie sound like the truth. The hearing ended, and the judge announced her decision. My heart was in my throat. She didn't side with me. She didn't side with Leo. The court is in a difficult position, she said, her voice stern. Both parties have presented compelling, yet conflicting evidence. The claims of fraud and undue influence are serious, and the documentation presented by Mr. Leo is highly persuasive. Therefore, the temporary restraining order and transfer of possession will remain in effect. This case requires further investigation. I am ordering a full, independent financial and psychological evaluation of Mr. Avor's father, and the original trust documents will be examined by a court-appointed expert. A full hearing will be set in 6 months. Until then, the property remains under Mr. Leo's temporary possession. My world crumbled. 6 months. 6 more months of being homeless, of being separated from my dad, of Leo having free rein to destroy the house. I felt a wave of despair so powerful it almost knocked me over. I had told the truth, but it wasn't enough. The truth wasn't a sword. It was a fragile shield that had been easily broken by my brothers while practiced lies. As we walked out of the courtroom, Leo gave me a smug, triumphant look. "See, Avor," he whispered, his voice low. "The house is mine. You lose." I wanted to fight him, to scream at him, but all the fight had been drained out of me. I just walked past him, a hollow, empty feeling in my chest. Mark put his arm around me, a silent comfort. "I don't understand, Sarah," I said to my lawyer on the sidewalk. He lied. We had the proof. He had forged documents. "Avor," she said, her voice grim. He was prepared. He had a story that the judge could believe. He knew how to play the system. But don't give up. We have 6 months. We will use this time to build an even stronger case. But what could we do? We had already presented the truth. My father, my best witness, was a hostage, unable to speak freely. What else could we possibly find to counter my brother's professional level fraud? The next day, as I sat in Mark's apartment, staring into the blank abyss of my future, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. I picked up, and a shaky, hesitant voice said, "Avor, it's your dad's neighbor, Mrs. Gable. I'm so sorry to call you like this, but I had to." My heart jumped into my throat. "What is it, Mrs. Gable? Is my dad okay?" He's fine, for now," she said, her voice full of worry. "But he asked me to get a package to you. He saw me in the backyard yesterday and waved me over." Leo was inside. Your dad threw a small, wrapped box over the fence and mouthed, "Give this to Avor. He told me it was important." I put it in my mailbox and waited until Leo was gone to retrieve it. "I hope it helps you." My hands were shaking as I thanked her. A package from my dad. A secret message from inside the house. Mark and I drove to Mrs. Gable's house immediately. She handed me a small, unassuming box wrapped in brown paper and twine. It was the size of a jewelry box. I thanked her profusely and rushed back to the car, my heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the car, I carefully unwrapped the paper. Inside was a small, worn, leather-bound book. It was my father's journal, but not a regular journal. This was his house book. I remembered him telling me about it when I was a kid. He had recorded every single repair, every detail about the house's history. He had recorded the names of the previous owners, the history of the land, every little detail about the property he had loved so much. And tucked into the pages, a single, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and my breath caught in my throat. It was a note, written in my dad's familiar, shaky handwriting. "Avor," it read. "I know what Leo is doing. He found something I never told you about. A secret. A lie. He's using it against us. You must look in the basement, under the second to last floorboard from the stairs, on the left side. There's a box. It's been there since before you were born. It contains the truth about our house. It contains the proof of my gift to you. It contains the real reason why I gave you this house. Don't tell anyone. Don't let Leo find it. This is our only hope. I love you, my daughter. Win this for us." Tears streamed down my face. My dad had been fighting for me all along, from inside that prison. He had risked everything to get this message to me. He was giving me a key not just to the house, but to the truth that could expose my brother's elaborate lies and win this war once and for all. I looked at Mark, my eyes filled with a new kind of fire. "He has a secret," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Leo has been hiding something. The house isn't what he says it is. And my dad just told me where to find the proof. I had my marching orders." The game was about to change. It was no longer about defending my truth. It was about exposing his lie. It was about retrieving the key that could unlock the door to our home and my family's justice. I had 6 months. The clock was ticking. I had a key. Not to the front door, of course. Leo had changed the locks the day he kicked me out. But when my dad was putting the house in my name, he had given me a spare key to the back door, a little silver one he had carved himself when he was first working on the house. "For emergencies," he had told me, with a wink. He had no idea how much of an emergency this would become. I had kept it in a little tin box with old photographs and letters, a forgotten relic of a life that now seemed so far away. I showed the journal and the note to Mark. His eyes widened as he read my dad's shaky handwriting. "Your dad is a genius, Avor," he said, the old sparkle returning to his eyes. "This is it. This is how we win." We made a plan. We couldn't go in broad daylight. Leo was home, always watching, and we couldn't risk getting caught. Getting arrested would only give him more ammunition against me, making me look like a desperate, crazy person. The risk was enormous, but the reward, the truth, it was worth it. We decided to go late on a Friday night. Leo was known for going out with his work friends. It was our best shot. I packed a small bag with a flashlight, some gloves, and a few tools. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a potent mix of adrenaline and a burning sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. This was about reclaiming my home, my family's honor, and my father's freedom. T. 11:30 p.m. We parked Mark's car 2 blocks away from the house. The street was quiet, the houses dark. Everything felt wrong, like I was about to break into a stranger's house. But this wasn't a stranger's house. This was my home. Every bush, every crack in the sidewalk, every shadow was a memory. The familiar scent of honeysuckle from the neighbor's yard filled the air, a scent that had once meant comfort and now meant a painful longing. We crept up the driveway, a million thoughts racing through my head. What if he was home? What if he had installed a security system? What if he had put a dog in the yard? I tried to push the fear away. This was for my dad. This was for my mom. I had to do this. I walked to the back door, the little silver key cold and heavy in my hand. I tried it. It worked. The lock clicked. A small, beautiful sound. I let out a shaky breath, a silent cheer. We were in. We slipped inside, my heart pounding in my ears. The air was different. Colder. Staler. It didn't smell like Mom's baking or Dad's old pipe tobacco anymore. It smelled like dust and something else. Something new. The silence was deafening, the house holding its breath. We tiptoed down the hallway, past the closed doors of my parents' rooms, past the ghosts of our past. I felt a wave of nausea. The gut-wrenching realization of how much he had already changed this place. He had changed the very soul of it. We made our way to the basement door, a small, dark entrance I had always been slightly afraid of as a child. I shone my flashlight down the stairs. The smell was stronger here, a mix of old wood and something vaguely chemical. Leo was definitely having work done. I knew this was our last chance. If he tore up the floor, the box would be lost forever. I found the stairs and knelt down, my flashlight beam sweeping across the floorboards. I counted them, my heart thumping against my ribs. 1, 2, 10, and then to the second to last floorboard from the stairs on the left side. I could see the telltale sign of a floorboard that had been replaced. It was slightly newer, slightly cleaner. The wood was a little lighter. My dad had been busy with a small pry bar Mark had brought. I carefully worked the floorboard loose. It took a few agonizing minutes, the squeal of the wood-on-wood feeling like a gunshot in the silent house. But then it gave way. I lifted the board and shone my flashlight into the dark space beneath. There it was, a small metal box. It was old, rusty, and looked like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. I grabbed it, my hands trembling. We didn't stay to look at it. We didn't have to. We had what we came for. We quickly replaced the floorboard, brushed away the dust, and crept back out of the house, leaving the door unlocked behind us as a final little act of defiance. We got back to the car and drove away without looking back, my heart full of a wild, exhilarating sense of triumph. We got back to Mark's apartment and I put the box on the coffee table. I could barely contain my excitement. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from anticipation. I pulled off the rusty latch and the lid creaked open. Inside were a stack of documents, brittle and yellowed with age, tied with a simple piece of twine. The first document was a deed, but it was much older than the one in my name. It was dated 1965, the year my dad bought the house. But the names on the deed were not my father's. The names were my grandfather's, my mom's father, who had passed away when I was a baby and who I had never known. The name was listed along with a small, private foundation I had never heard of before. I started reading, my eyes scanning the old, flowing script. And then I found it. The revelation that my dad had been talking about. The real reason he gave me the house. The house wasn't a typical purchase by my dad. It was a purchase made by my maternal grandfather through his foundation, meant as a future home for his daughter, my mother. The original deed specified that the property was to be held in trust for my mother and her children. But there was a shocking twist, an addendum signed by my grandfather and his lawyer. The trust stipulated that in the event of my grandfather's death, the house would eventually pass to his firstborn granddaughter, not to his son, my uncle, who had passed away years ago, but to his granddaughter, me. My dad had taken a huge risk to protect his wife and kids. He bought the house from the foundation at a fair market price when my grandfather died and transferred it into his own name to avoid any potential legal disputes with my uncle over the trust. But he had secretly held onto a copy of the original trust documents and the addendum, keeping them safe. He knew, deep down, that a day might come when these documents would be needed. He knew that the original ownership and the reason for it would prove his love for me and my mom. He knew that this house was a gift from my grandfather, not just from him and mom. I started putting the pieces together. My father had bought the house from the foundation, but the original trust document still existed, proving that the house was always meant for my mom's bloodline, for me. He had been keeping this secret from everyone, even Leo, all these years. And when he and my mother decided to give me the house, they had a more powerful reason than just gratitude. They were fulfilling my grandfather's wish. This wasn't just a gift. It was my inheritance from my mom's side of the family. And then I saw it. The thing that Leo had found. the thing that he had used against us. A small, separate paper, detailing a loan from the foundation to my father for the purchase of the house. Leo must have found this document and used it to claim that my father was in debt to the foundation and that the house was not fully his to give. He must have used this to argue that the house was a financial burden, a liability. But the addendum, the key piece of the puzzle, showed that the loan had been a symbolic transaction, a way to fulfill the trust's legal requirements while keeping the house in the family. The real purpose of the loan was to ensure that the house would eventually be mine, as the trust dictated. Leo's entire case, his whole malicious, elaborate plan, was based on a lie and a single, isolated document he had found and twisted to his advantage. He had no idea about the addendum, about the true purpose of the trust. He was in the dark, just like I had been. He thought he had all the cards, but my dad had kept the ace up his sleeve all along. I looked at Mark, my eyes wide. He doesn't know about this, I whispered, holding up the addendum. He thought he had all the information, but he's missing the most important part. The sense of hopelessness I had felt just a few hours ago was gone, replaced by a fierce, unshakable determination. This wasn't just my dad's house. It was my grandfather's house, my mom's house, and it was mine, legally and morally. The next morning, I called Sarah, my lawyer. I told her everything. The heist, the box, the documents. She was silent for a long moment. Then I heard her voice, thick with emotion. "Avor," she said, "this changes everything. Your father is a genius. We don't just win this case. We expose him. We sue him for fraud. We get you back in that house. And we make him pay for everything he's done." The final hearing was just a month away. We had our evidence. We had our truth. And we were going to use it to bring down the house of cards my brother had so carefully built on a foundation of lies. This was the end. And I was going to make sure the ending was a happy one. The day of the final hearing dawned bright and clear, but in my heart, I felt a storm of emotions. Mark and I had spent the past month with Sarah, meticulously preparing the evidence. From my dad's box, the original trust documents, the addendum, the proof of Leo's lies was now a full-fledged legal arsenal. We walked into the courtroom, and I felt a quiet strength I hadn't felt in months. This was it. The final battle. Leo was already there, looking just as smug and confident as before. He gave me a brief, condescending nod, a look that said, "I already won." He had no idea what was coming. The hearing began, and my lawyer, Sarah, stood up to address the judge. She didn't waste any time. "Your Honor, my client, Miss Avor, is not the greedy opportunist Mr. Leo has painted her to be." The temporary eviction order was granted based on fabricated evidence and a deliberate misinterpretation of a single document. She went on to systematically dismantle Leo's case, piece by piece. She showed the judge the real medical records of my father, proving his mental acuity. She showed the bank statements, highlighting the legitimate transactions that Leo had twisted to look like exploitation. And then she dropped the bombshell. "And now, Your Honor, we present the true legal history of this property. The house in question was never intended to be a shared family asset. It was a gift, not just from Miss Avor's parents, but from her grandfather, who willed the property in trust to his daughter, and then to his firstborn granddaughter, my client. We have the original trust documents from 1965 and a signed addendum that proves it." The judge's eyes widened as she read the documents Sarah had provided. A hush fell over the courtroom. I looked at Leo. His face, once so composed, was now pale. He looked at his own lawyer, who seemed just as stunned. The calm fard was cracking. He had based his entire case on a lie, and now the truth was standing right there, undeniable. Then Sarah brought it home. Mr. Liu's case was built on one document alone from the foundation to Miss Avor's father. He presented this as proof of a financial burden, but the document itself was part of a larger, legal transaction to fulfill the terms of the trust. He took a single page and used it to try and steal a home that was never and will never be his. His motive was not to protect his father, but to sell the property for a profit, which he had already begun to do, as evidenced by the contractors he has brought in. The judge turned to Liu, her expression one of cold fury. "Mr. Liu, do you have any rebuttal to this evidence?" He stood up, his face ashen, his words a jumble of desperate excuses. This is a forgery. It's not real. My father is confused." Avor coerced him, but his words had no power. The documents were notarized, dated, and legally sound. The judge had seen through his manipulation. She slammed her gavel down. "Case dismissed. The temporary restraining order is vacated. The deed is legally and rightfully in Miss Avor's name. This court finds Mr. Liu's actions to be a deliberate act of fraud and perjury. He will be held in contempt of court, and I am recommending a full criminal investigation." My breath caught in my throat. It was over. The feeling wasn't one of triumph, but of relief so profound, I thought I might collapse. Tears streamed down my face. Mark rushed to my side, wrapping me in a hug. My brother's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and disbelief. He had lost, and he had lost everything. Outside the courtroom, he tried to rush past us, but the bailiff stopped him. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a hatred I had never seen before. "You did this, Avor," he spat, his voice low and vicious. "You stole my life. You ruined everything." I looked at him, not with hatred, but with a deep, aching sadness. "You did this to yourself, Liu," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't steal your life. You tried to steal mine. You chose money over family. You chose a lie over the truth. And in the end, that lie cost you everything." He just stared at me, his face a mix of fury and devastation. Before the bailiff led him away, the first thing I did after leaving the courthouse was go straight to the house with the court order. I knocked on the door, and my dad opened it, his face etched with worry. When he saw me, a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face. We rushed into each other's arms, and I held him so tight I thought I would never let go. "You did it, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You won." The house felt different, though. My dad showed me what Liu had done. He had ripped out the old, familiar carpet and was in the process of tearing down a wall. He had already installed new, modern light fixtures that felt cold and sterile. He had been so sure of his victory that he had already begun to destroy our home. But as I stood in the living room with my father and Mark, looking at the half-finished renovations, a new idea took root. We would restore it, not to what it was before, because you can't go back, but to something new, something beautiful. We would bring life and love back into these walls. The broken pieces were a reminder of what we had survived, and the rebuilding would be a testament to our strength. My dad's health improved dramatically. He was free, and he was home. He started talking about the house again, not as a source of stress, but as a project we could work on together. I stayed with him for a few weeks and then, with his blessing, I moved back in. My dad had the space and peace he needed, and I had a new sense of purpose. Leo was charged with fraud and was forced to sell his condo to pay for the legal fees and damages. The man who had everything now had nothing. I never heard from him again. The brother I knew was gone, and in his place was a stranger, a ghost of a person consumed by greed. The house is mine now, truly and completely. It's no longer just a house. It's a legacy, a testament to my grandfather's love, my parents' sacrifice, and my own strength. It's a place where I will rebuild, not just the walls, but my life. With my dad, and with Mark, who was my unwavering support through it all. So, if you're watching this and you're going through something similar, remember this: a home isn't just a building. It's a place where your memories live. It's a feeling of safety, a place of love. And sometimes you have to fight for it with everything you have. Don't let anyone, not even your own blood, take that from you. Your truth is a powerful weapon, and in the end, it will always be the strongest force. Thank you for listening to my story. Please like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.